Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. How a family's quest led to an arrest in the 1985 killing of Florida teen Leslie McCray.
I physically felt the relief off my shoulders.
Investigators now saying a man behind bars for other sex crimes is the killer. And the sentencing hearing for South Dakota's Attorney General. Why Jason Ravnsborg won't be spending any time behind bars for a fatal crash.
This is not a homicide case.
Plus, police officers attacked in the Capitol siege, now suing. The officer who shot rioter Ashley Babbitt speaking out. And the unearthed body cam footage of an officer beating an unarmed black man during a traffic stop. Why it took nearly 2 years for it to be discovered.
Hit him in the hand with a flashlight.
Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. More than 35 years after a Florida teen was kidnapped from her apartment and murdered, investigators in Jacksonville say they've solved the case. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with more on the arrest in Leslie McCray's case. Anjanette?
Brian, Leslie McCray's family has been waiting decades to find out who murdered her on Christmas Eve back in 1985. I spoke with her half-brother about the charges.
This heinous crime took the life of an innocent young woman, terrorized the family, and victimized our community.
Standing next to Leslie McCray's family, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office announced the indictment of a man in the 1985 Christmas Eve murder of Leslie McCray. McCray was 17 when someone broke into her apartment and tied up her boyfriend.
Leslie was last seen by her boyfriend being taken out against her will from that apartment by the armed suspect.
McCray's family reached out to Project Cold Case in 2019 in the hope of solving her murder. That group partnered with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. The Sheriff's Office says DNA testing led to David Nelson Austin, an inmate in prison in Michigan for sex crimes.
Our hope is to have more developments like this to bring closure in future cases where we can solve them, bring accountability for offenders, and have justice finally served.
I just really felt like there was an answer out there that was going to happen.
Travis McCray was 9 when his older half-sister was murdered. The news of the arrest brings relief.
I'm just very glad it happened finally. Now, of course, we're hoping and waiting for conviction because that's ultimately where the end line is.
And prosecutors say they are working to have David Nelson Austin extradited from Michigan to Florida to face charges for Leslie McCray's murder. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. Joining us today is civil rights attorney Jeff Storms and Terry Austin. Jeff, you're no stranger to seeing families have to wait years to find justice. What do you imagine David Austin's indictment meant for Leslie McCray's family?
Brian, the relief has to be extraordinary. You know, I work with families on a daily basis who have lost loved ones, and not knowing kills these families over and over again. You know, it prevents them from having the closure they need to move on. And just knowing some of them, just every nitty-gritty detailed fact. And here we're talking about, you know, the biggest fact, right? Who did it, or at least one of the biggest facts. So I can't imagine the load it must take off of this family.
Absolutely. Now, Terry, DNA match and David Austin stayed in Jacksonville area when McCray went missing. Is this starting to sound like a strong case for the prosecution?
Anytime you have DNA, Brian, it's going to be a stronger case for the prosecution. Austin actually lived in Jacksonville in 1985 when the murder actually occurred. He left Florida, went to Michigan, and committed multiple crimes there. He's serving 2 life sentences for sexual assault. Fortunately, it's really good that the family said, let's reopen and reinvestigate this case, and the authorities were able to match his DNA or the DNA of the suspect to the DNA of the individual who was in jail in Michigan. So hopefully he'll be extradited, and then hopefully the prosecution will get even more evidence in addition to the DNA. But the DNA is definitely going to help.
Yeah, of course, that seems to be the next step here, extradition, getting him from point A to point B to be able to hear these charges and stand for trial likely. As these charges, I don't think he's going to get a plea deal. Anjanette, what is David Austin saying about being charged?
Well, we don't know exactly what he is saying. We haven't spoken to him. However, his son, whom he had never met, Owen Austin, had contacted a television station in Jacksonville, Florida, and said, "Hey, I've never met him, but he is my dad, and he emailed me and said he's being charged with this crime, and he claims he is innocent." So that is according to his son, whom he's never met but reached out to via email.
Interesting turn of events and how that's bringing the defendant's words to the forefront, something we don't typically see, especially in cases where the individual is already incarcerated. Thank you all. Turning now to more top legal news, a male accuser will take the stand against R. Kelly next week as prosecutors continue to present evidence against R&B singer at his sex trafficking trial. Two women have taken the stand against R. Kelly, accusing him of decades of abuse, rape, and forced abortions. R. Kelly's former employees also testified that the singer actually docked their pay for small infractions. R. Kelly is charged with racketeering, and prosecutors say he transported minors across state lines and filmed them performing sexual acts. Court is dark on Friday. Testimony is set to resume Monday. An Ohio mother and her boyfriend pled guilty in the death of her 6-year-old son. James Hutchinson's mother, Brittany Gosney, reported him missing back in February, but police said she later confessed to trying to leave him at a park with his siblings and hitting and killing him with her vehicle. Gosney pled guilty to murder and other charges related to James's death. Her boyfriend, James Hamilton, pled guilty to kidnapping, gross abuse of a corpse, and child endangering. Police said they admitted to throwing little James's body in the Ohio River after he died, and that Hamilton had been pressing Gosney to get rid of her kids. His body has never been found. And in California, Robert Durst is still on the stand after a week of cross-examination. Robert Durst is charged with murdering his best friend, Susan Berman, who was found with a gunshot wound to her head in her home in December 2000. Berman allegedly had information about Robert Durst's missing wife, Kathy, and threatened to contact authorities. Before court adjourned for the weekend, prosecutor John Lewin started questioning the real estate heir about his relationship with his Galveston neighbor, Morris Black, another death that Durst was accused of and later acquitted for. Be sure to tune into Law and Crime Network for gavel-to-gavel coverage. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, the officer who killed Ashley Babbitt speaks out for the first time since the siege on the Capitol. But first, the unearthed body cam footage of a state trooper beating a black motorist revealed nearly 2 years after the incident. The video after the break. Welcome back. We look to Louisiana, where body cam footage from a brutal traffic stop is now being released 2 years later. In this graphic footage obtained from the Associated Press, a routine traffic stop by Louisiana state troopers ends when Officer Jacob Brown strikes a black motorist 18 times with a flashlight, later saying it was part of pain compliance. State police didn't start investigating the attack until nearly 2 years later. Claiming that Officer Brown intentionally mislabeled the body cam footage, he now faces state charges of second-degree battery and malfeasance. Brown has also racked up 23 other use of force incidents dating back to 2015, 19 of which target black people. The state trooper has since resigned.
Hang tight. I haven't done nothing. Give us your hand. Give me your fucking hand. Give me your fucking hand. Give me your hand. Give me I'm not resisting. I'm not resisting. Give me your hand. Give me your fucking hand. I ain't messing with you. Give him your fucking hand. Give me your hand. Okay.
Let's bring back civil rights attorney, the one who actually represents the family of Dante Wright, Jeff Storms, and co-host Terry Austin. Terry, Brown is being charged not just for the crime, but also the cover-up. Do you think there is even a defense for the state criminal case?
You know, that video says it all. It speaks volume. It's difficult to defend the actions there. And if in fact there was a cover-up, that's unconscionable. So you can hear Bowman in the video saying, I'm not resisting, I'm not fighting you, you're fighting me. Now, what the officer is claiming is that Bowman hit the other officer in the video. And if you can see that, okay, that's a defense. But this was a traffic stop. And for the officer to say that this was pain compliance, it's hard to understand what the pain compliance could have been for. And the fact that, you know, this video is so gruesome, he's had multiple cases, 23 you mentioned before, and 19 of them involving people of color, you have to wonder whether or not he is using force unreasonably. And, covering it up is obviously unconscionable.
Yeah, part of the cover-up is what they're saying took so long for this case to be brought forward that he mislabeled the body-worn camera as an encounter that seemed different than what actually occurred. Jeff, you've got to be looking at this and just counting the civil rights violations. So can you break them down for us?
Well, Brian, there's obviously, I think, the risk of criminal civil rights charges here and expectation. The civil side, what I typically deal with, you're looking at your basic excessive force case, along with a case likely to be brought against the employer because of this history and their continued employment and failure to take action. I'm sure the attorneys will be digging into that. But in terms of the excessive force, the way he's using this blunt force instrument, it's really reminiscent of the types of police tools we've gotten rid of, right? We've gotten rid of billy clubs, we've gotten rid of blackjacks. This type of instrument that causes blunt force trauma is something that there's really no police purpose for at this point, other than in life and death situations, because it can cause death. And so here, there's very little, there's no excuse for the use of blunt force trauma and in the flashlight in that matter here.
I tend to agree as well. Now, Jeff, cameras on both officers and in the courts allow for transparency, but in the Kim Potter trial, there won't be cameras in the court. What are your thoughts on that?
I really don't think it's what our community needs right now. I know it's not what the family wants. We saw justice happen, across the country and across the world in the Chauvin murder trial. We were able to see how things actually happen, which I think gave all of us a little more confidence and faith in the system. And I think in Minneapolis in particular, where we have other issues going on, such as the killing of Winston Smith by undercover deputized officers who are not wearing body cameras, we have a community that wants transparency, wants to see what's going on. And Daunte Wright's killing by Kim Potter is one of the most important police issues going on in our country right now. And I think the public, should see what's happening in that trial. So we're obviously disappointed that they can't.
Absolutely, and hopefully that changes over the coming months before that trial begins. Thank you both. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, South Dakota's Attorney General learns his fate for fatally striking a man with his car. Plus, 7 Capitol police officers are suing Donald Trump and many more for injuries during the Capitol insurrection. Their legal claims ahead. Welcome back. 7 law enforcement officers who were attacked during the January 6th Capitol riot are filing a federal civil lawsuit against several people that they say are responsible for their injuries. The January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol injured over 100 law enforcement officers. 7 of those are now suing Donald Trump, the Trump campaign, the Proud Boys, and a collection of other organizations that they deemed responsible for their injuries, claiming that they contributed to inciting the insurrection. The officers and their attorneys released a joint statement stating that since the insurrection, their jobs have become infinitely more dangerous. Rioter Ashley Babbitt, an unarmed Air Force veteran, was shot and killed by a Capitol police officer while attempting to climb through a shattered window. That officer has been cleared of any wrongdoing, but has remained silent since the attack, until now. Lieutenant Michael Byrd spoke with NBC's Lester Holt on Nightly News.
You're taught to aim for center mass. The subject was sideways, and I could not see her full motion of her hands or anything. So I guess her movement, caused the discharge to fall where it did.
And what did you think this individual was doing at that moment?
She was posing a threat to United States House of Representatives.
Back with us is civil rights attorney Jeff Storms and Terry Austin. Terry, does what Lieutenant Michael Byrd said in his interview line up with a self-defense or defense of others claim?
I think it does, Brian, because we know Byrd and the other officers feared for their lives. And in fact, we know Brian Sicknick died from his injuries, and many others, or several others, actually committed suicide not long after the event. So the fact that dozens were injured, obviously they feared for their life. And they were there trying to protect Congress and trying to protect the Capitol. So I think when we saw in the interview there that he was saying, stand down, and there weren't any individuals standing down, and she, just continued to move forward, he felt he had to shoot to defend the Capitol and to defend lives. And in fact, at the end of the day, the Capitol Police said that he rightly defended the Capitol and that he probably saved other lives.
Now, Jeff, is there a civil rights case for Ashley Babbitt's family here? Why or why not?
Brian, I've spent a lot of time soul searching over this one and what I would do if this case came into my office, because I've spent a lot of my adult life arguing that people who are unarmed shouldn't have been killed by law enforcement. I think there's a critical fact that I've heard in the interviews that the lieutenant shared, which was he had heard that shots had been fired before he had discharged his weapon. And so a reasonable officer who hears that shots have been fired and people are breaking through and posing a threat to Congress members, I think you're going to have a lot of judges, particularly in the world of qualified immunity, right, where ambiguity favors officers. And has there ever been less of an example of something in the United States history than civilians storming the Capitol? So I think it's going to be a very difficult, civil rights case. And I think those are two critical pieces why.
Absolutely, I would agree. Thank you both. When we come back, the sentencing hearing for South Dakota's Attorney General, what his no contest plea means for a crash that killed a man on the side of a road. Find out next. Welcome back. South Dakota's Attorney General will not have to spend any time in jail for a crash that left one man dead. Jason Ravnsborg pled no contest and was adjudicated guilty to misdemeanor charges of improper lane change and using a mobile device while driving. One charge of careless driving was dropped. Ravnsborg struck Joe Beaver with his car last September. Beaver's body was found the following morning. Ravnsborg was scheduled to stand trial this week, but agreed to plead no contest. The deal keeps him out of jail, terms the victim's family was not happy with.
Joe, our brother and son, died horrifically and was left behind carelessly not once but twice. The first night he was killed, the second after the defendant returned to the scene the next day. Our brother laid in the ditch for almost 12 hours. This is inexcusable. State Attorney General Jason Ravnsborg ran our brother down and then used his position, knowledge, and resources to selfishly string this case along and, more importantly, widen and deepen the wounds of our loss. We feel that at no point has the defendant shown any remorse and has instead demonstrated callousness with respect to the life he took and the victim's family and friends.
What he did is he broke his own law. His law states do not use your phone. And what did he do? He was using his phone and he ended up killing my husband that night. And it has taken an emotional toll beyond anything I've ever seen. So I'm against the fact that he will not get jail time at all.
I understand that, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
It is conclusively proven that that phone was not in use at the time of this collision. That phone, you can tell the exact second everything happened. You can tell coordinates and everything. And the phone was not being used from east of Highmore all the way through. This was an accident. She said that he was reckless. Well, guess what? Reckless has a defined meaning under our law. And if a person's reckless and causes the death of another, that is a homicide case, second-degree manslaughter. Those facts were not here. We're here today to deal with 2 misdemeanor traffic infractions, the lowest level of offense we have in this state, a Class 2 misdemeanor.
The judge agreed with the defense, ruling the Attorney General would not have to pay restitution nor serve jail time, but does need to pay several $1,000s in court fees and fines.
I'm going to deny the request for funeral costs. It appears those were paid by insurance or covered by insurance, which is the purpose. Mr. Ravnsborg will have 30 days within which to pay any fines and costs. In addition, I am going to require that Mr. Ravnsborg do a significant public service event over a period of 5 years, once each year, on or about the anniversary date of Mr. Bieber's death.
I've got no insightful words or questions for this one. This was, in my opinion, a miscarriage of justice, not only for, most importantly, the family, but for every person in rural or urban communities sitting in jail for petty crimes, as Ravnsborg's quote-unquote accident killed someone. So, Jeff, first, your thoughts.
In my opinion, it just feels like the good old boy system at work, and I think that's how the public is going to view it. And I hope that this family finds better information and gets a better result in whatever civil proceeding they pursue.
Agreed. Now, Terry, is this justice in your eyes?
I don't think this is justice. It is a miscarriage of justice, no question about it. And I think we're all in adamant agreement about that. The Attorney General must have known he hit a human being. There were glasses in his car. He left the scene, and he has admitted that he was distracted while he was driving. So to have some, light amount of penalty here in terms of what he has to pay for cost and to serve no jail time, I think is a miscarriage of justice. And in fact, I do hope that the family brings a civil action so they'll at least have that.
Yeah. Well, we know at least one great civil rights attorney, so maybe they'll reach out to him. Well, thank you both for talking here today, and thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.